While we were in Greece, we had the blessing of visiting the ancient ruins of the city of Corinth. And this is where there was a community of believers, a small church that Paul started on his second missionary journey. And the letter that we have that we call First Corinthians is very valuable for us because we hear again the emphases in Paul's theology, especially about Christ crucified and raised from the dead, as well as we have the fascinating component of Paul answering specific questions that have been written to him in a letter by the Corinthian church. One of the struggles, and we see this in Paul's opening chapter and into the beginning of chapter 2, is Paul describing the message of the cross, that it's foolish to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. And Christ crucified is the power of God to save, and that's a message to be accepted and lived. And as you've heard me say again and again, being a Christian is not just accepting or acknowledging we believe something. Being a follower of Christ is a message to be lived. And Paul says that people sought to know God through wisdom, but they didn't find God that way. But that the way we find God is through Christ. And through Christ crucified, which is, Paul says, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But in our verse for the day, verse 24, but to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. God's power, Paul is saying to the church, is made manifest in vulnerability and in weakness. No one is more vulnerable, weaker than somebody being killed on a cross, especially when you think this is God who has incarnated himself in human form in Jesus, willing to die on the cross for you and for me. And so God's power is not power that's imposed by force or by control. It's God's power that's offered in love and vulnerability. And the wisdom of Christ may seem like foolishness to some people, but for us who are being saved, it is there for our transformation. So Christ is both the wisdom of God, in him all the wisdom of God was pleased to dwell. And at the same time, we see that God's weakness is stronger than human strength.